It's the conditioning of this society. So we are actually living in a psychopathic design where there's a parasite and there's a host. And we've all been taught that we're worthless, you know, and that is the opposite of the truth.
Today, I have an amazing conversation with Elizabeth Wright. She is a retreat leader, a spiritual energy healer, a teacher, a speaker, a channel, a nature lover, an author, and she's working on her second book even. She's lived all over the world. She was born in India and she's now living in Costa Rica. She has some amazing life lessons to share with everybody today about living with narcissists or sociopaths and finding your true self and finding your self-love, and how we are all ever evolving beings on this path that we are on as our planet shifts and people start to awaken. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful nuggets of wisdom that Elizabeth shares today. And please like, share, and subscribe. This is the way these beautiful stories get shared with others who perhaps might not see them. We gotta fight that algorithm together, guys. Let's do it. So without further ado, here is Elizabeth Wright. Welcome, Elizabeth. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and I'm really grateful to be here.
I love that your background reflects where you are right now. You are in beautiful Costa Rica, is that correct?
Yes, I am, and although this isn't the actual background, that it's pretty close.
I
I love
figured
it
it
here.
was pretty close. Yeah. I was reading a little bit on your website and I find it fascinating that you were born in India. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, my dad was working for the Rockefeller Foundation at the time. And so he was stationed there for 6 years and part of the Green Revolution back in the 60s, which was a time when there was very little food and people were dying. So they had to bring in people to create more yields more grain per acre of food so that people would have something to eat. And so he was on that project. It was very successful. And I was there. I was born during that time.
Wow, fascinating. And I love how
Yeah,
you're turning into your rainbow body right now as we speak.
I am. I love it.
You were just right before that. It must have been a burst of light coming through. It's very beautiful.
Ah,
So, how was that growing up there for you? What was it like?
I loved it. I mean, I didn't know any different, but so I was raised in India, and then when I was close to 4, we moved to Ankara, Turkey. So I was there till about 10 years of age. And we traveled all over the world, so I'd been around the world 3 times by the time I was 10. So it was a wonderful life. And interestingly enough, I was always a minority, a little blonde white girl in living in the land of India and Turkey, where that and then I was a minority. And here I am in Costa Rica, again, a minority. And I actually prefer living overseas out of the States because it's familiar to me and I feel more at home.
Hmm.
It was a great childhood. I was very blessed and lucky to have had that experience growing up.
So then came your awakening in 2002, I believe you said it was. What transpired there? What was the impetus for that?
So that happened when I was in Australia, and it was time for me to wake up and start my path as a healer. So I was 34 at the time, and I was living a life working for Channel 7, Sydney, Australia. So, like the corporate world. And I was really quite miserable. Um, actually, I'm wrong. I was working for a different company at that time, but I wasn't happy in the work that I was doing. And so everything was sort of wiped off the table. I had my job taken away. I had my boyfriend taken away. I had my, can you hear that music in the background?
No.
Okay. I had everything taken away from my life. And all of a sudden, I found myself living in a friend's converted garage on the coast of Australia. So by myself, I wasn't working, and I had been living with boyfriends, and you know, I didn't really know who I was. So when I lost everything, it was forcing me to find out who I was. And so it was a very intense time. And I was terrified, actually. I was away from my family. I felt very alone. And so every day I would just get up and I would go to the beach and try to rebalance myself. And one day I walked by this woman's house and she had a sandwich board out the front of her house saying massage and massage. And I got the feeling I really needed to go in there. So finally, after crossing that sign many times, I finally went in and talked to her. And I told her what was going on with me. And I just, I asked her if she could help me. I didn't have any money at the time. She's like, come on in. So then she said, look, I'm going to give you an energy healing session. And I'm like, oh, damn, I really want a massage. It's like, I'm in pain and I want some help. So she's like, trust me. I'm like, all right. So she gave me this energy healing session for an hour, and I cried through the whole thing. And I felt this intense pressure in my body. And during it, she was opening all my chakras and connecting me to the earth and connecting me to heaven and energetically. And that's when I had this huge awakening, and I just sort of woke up and I kind of knew who I was because I connected to my higher self. And it was super profound. And as soon as it was finished, there was no more pain in my body. I could see rainbows in everything. Like the whole world had become alive. And I just knew who I was. I knew, things I didn't know before. But it was such an intense awakening that I had a really hard time integrating it within normal society. It was like it's like I knew the truths of life. And then all of a sudden, everything I saw around me didn't reflect that. And then I got hired at Channel 7 Sydney, and I was like, what am I doing here? Everyone's priorities are all about money, and this is all wrong, but a person needs to eat. So so that was my awakening. And it took 14 years for me to integrate that. And there's a bird right over my head, and I hope it doesn't poop on me.
Oh, it'll make for a great podcast if it does.
Yeah, two birds.
Well, if you have a hat, go ahead and feel free to put it. I find it fascinating that you worked in TV. I used to work in television for almost 30 years. And it's such an cesspool of just money grubbing madness. And that was kind of the impetus for me being in that environment, and then getting cancer from being in that environment that woke me up. But there seems to be a lot of advertising, marketing type people that are out there now that have awakened, for years. I find that interesting. I wonder if there's something to do with the creative mindset, maybe, or the open-mindedness that pulls us types in. What do you think?
To being awakened?
Yes.
Or to being in the creative realm?
No, to being awakened.
I think everyone is being awakened now, So it just, and usually through difficult circumstances. So it takes a struggle or a chaotic event or something really serious to make people go, oh, Oh my God, which is why I think what's happening in the world is happening in the world right now,
I
because
I
this
just
is
meant the
getting people.
precursor kind of, to this. I mean, I know we all are now being shook up big time.
Oh,
Yeah, and it feels like the precursor, a lot of creative types were kind of starting it. That's all I meant.
okay. I would agree with that. I mean, I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. Yeah.
So then, okay, so you are all of a sudden blown wide open. What do you
Yes,
do?
that's
What do
it.
you do with that?
Well, I struggled. I mean, I was so open. I would walk down the street and like the red in the stop sign was so bright that I could, you know, that it was hard to manage. So, here I was working at Channel 7 in Sydney. So I didn't manage it very well because I didn't have a community or anyone to sort of help me through that, navigate it, until I found a woman who sort of helped me learn about tarot and meditation and but in I also was going to that school to learn about energy healing. So I went to that school for 2 years. And it wasn't just energy healing, it was the higher self connection course. So I began to learn about my higher self. And and it's been 22 years walking this path. And so once I started to learn about that, I just, my doubt about spirit and about the truth beyond the illusion of this world began to fade slowly over time. And I realized that I belonged in the realm of being a healer. Like that was my calling. So I followed that calling because I don't know about you, but I don't like sitting behind a desk and working for someone else and doing something I don't believe in. We're on team light here, and we're here to help and assist with the shift of humanity from victim consciousness back to creator consciousness. So I think I've gotten really off track with the
No, not
question.
at all, not at all. So what, okay, so you're awake, you're working at TV, you don't know why am I here? Everything's just shifted for you in such a big way. How did you step out of that world and into the world you're in now?
So I was working in TV, and then it just became, I felt like I was living a lie. And then my mother passed away. And so then I moved back to the United States because that was all happening in Australia. And so she passed away suddenly out of the blue. She went in for a procedure at 70 to have a camera go down her throat and look into her lungs. And she ended up choking on the camera, and her heart fibrillated. She went into a coma, and then she died the next day. So, there was like a zero closure, and it was a really difficult experience. I was devastated. And so after that happened, I started to go downhill because I had a lot of unhealed trauma from the past. And so I was still self-medicating with alcohol at the time. So and I didn't know how to heal it. But then when my mom died, I ended up moving back to the US, and I lived with my sister for a little while and re-entered the US. And then after a time, I started my own business called Spirit Works, where I started to give energy healing sessions. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was terrifying at first. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, who am I to do this? But the urge, and this was at like almost 40 years of age. I finally found my calling. But the urge was so strong that I went ahead and did it. It was like one of my first cliffs that I jumped off of. And I quit my job in marketing, and I just started doing energy healing sessions. And I would just stand there quiet with the music on and my hand over the people and just hold it there and let the energy flow through me. And, it was good. It worked, but there is no but. But then after a time, I began to see beings of light come in to the session. I saw them around me. And then I started to get messages that wanted to come through me. So then I just opened my mouth and started talking and telling people what I was getting. And then my business grew as I did that and shared the messages. And it was very, very high vibration. And people loved it. And I was an open channel. And that went on for about 4 or 5 years. And then I asked the universe for more. I said, okay, I want to move out of New York because the sun never shines here and I'm a sun person. So, and I want to, I want more out of life. I want to do more. I want to help more. I want to be more. And the universe was like, check. So then I decided to, so then my father died in that time. And so then I decided to move to New Mexico. And when I moved to New Mexico is when a huge initiation began. It was in 2012. And that's when my whole world got changed and became really, really difficult for the next 12 years, which is just now about to end on April 8th, this eclipse. So I've been in an initiation for almost 12 years of difficulty and challenges. And so when you ask the universe for more, what it's going to do, it's going to say, okay, well, I'm going to test you here. And it's going to strengthen you and do everything you can to pull what's inside of you out of you so that you can then serve at a higher level. So
What were some of those things that you've dealt with over the past 12 years that have been part of the
yeah.
initiation?
Okay. So when I got to New Mexico, I got involved in a church, an ayahuasca church, where I was drinking ayahuasca every other weekend for almost 3 years. And that was a really good experience. That helped me. But then I left because I was having some issues with my autoimmune stuff in my body, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was carrying the same patterns that my mother had in her body, of her illness. But I couldn't heal it. I didn't know how to heal it. And so I was getting sicker and like feeling sicker and sicker. And money was a problem, scarcity issues. And I refused to work for anyone else. I feel like I'm disappearing on the screen.
Yeah, you're turning into a rainbow. It's quite beautiful.
There we go. Hold on. Okay. We are rainbows, actually. And so then I met this man in 2015, and I fell in love with him. Like, it was a whirlwind romance. And within 3 months, we got married. And I know.
Wow.
And then, yeah, and I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I'm like, here it is. Here, finally, the love of my life has showed up. And I've got some support, and I can figure out, what's wrong with me and get well. But he started to do things like tell me not to do my work anymore. He'd take care of me financially, but you don't have to do your work. It's like, okay. And then he started isolating me from my friends and family. Yeah. And then there was, some abuse, a little bit of abuse, but being a healer, I wanted to save him. I wanted to help him. And he was an expert manipulator and actor. And so I was completely fooled by him, but also I thought I loved him. And then a year into our relationship, after the day after we could have annulled the marriage, he this flipped the switch and just became this other person. And he was a very sick and frightening individual. And so during those 4 months together, after that 1 year together, I encountered what I'd never encountered before, which was just a really twisted, diabolical individual playing games with me. And he basically took me over. You know, it wasn't narcissist. I don't know if it was sociopath. I think it was psychopath, to be honest. And so he almost killed me twice, and my dog was shot and killed at the time, and I had to flee the home. And I went back to New York, which I didn't want to do. I went back to where I'd left just to have some safety and shelter. And what the reason that was happening was because I was not in my power. I was not standing in my power. And I was thinking that my power was outside of me, and I was codependent. And all my childhood trauma, everything that I hadn't dealt with was coming up to be healed. And the shadow was coming up to be healed. And it was this super intense situation. And so when I went back to New York, I had all this PTSD, and, you know, I had to work through all of my stuff, all of my generational stuff, all of my inner child, all of my shadow, you know, all the stuff that I thought I had already done, because there's so many layers. And it was just really, really hard. But I did it, you know, I did the work. And then that took 6 years. And so then I realized, well, in that time, I was living in New York, and a friend took me to Costa Rica. And when I went with her, I got COVID on the way over. And so I was quarantined here for 10 days extra. So I spent 21 days in Costa Rica. And during that time, I had the most beautiful, profound heart opening. And I just merged with all of the elements, like the sun, the sky, the earth, the water. And I lost sensation of my body. And my soul said, come here, come here. And so I went back home and tried to figure out how I was going to make that work, you know? And then I promptly forgot about it. And then last October, there was a very strong energy that pushed me over here. So then I just sold everything and came. And so here I am now. But I also want to talk about an experience that I had during that time. And so part of my work is to help women who have been through or are in narcissistic or abusive relationships. And there's way more than you would imagine that there are. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, there are a
Like
lot. I know a lot.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy once you find out how many women have had these kinds of relationships. And it's all for your empowerment. Like my ex was working for the devil. You know, he talked about Lucifer, the fallen angel. And so it's like when the angels can't get through to you, the devil comes in to do the work to help you see who you are. You know, if it doesn't kill you, it will make you stronger. I mean, that's a true that's a true thing. So when I was in New York, I was at that point after many years, after the very first awakening that I had in Australia. I was feeling less close to God. You know, I was feeling the power and the connection that I had with God from that first awakening was just diminished. And I was like, oh, I really need another light activation. So I was asking my team, I need a light activation. So, and I kept asking. So then I had the experience in that church in New Mexico, drinking the ayahuasca, which really is, it's good preparation work for um, doing other plant medicine. So when I went to a concert in Brooklyn, and I met this guy just randomly, like, and we started talking. And I said, "What are you doing in New York City?" And he said, "Well, I'm administering this plant medicine, or this medicine called Bufo alvarius, which is a toad venom. And what you do is you secrete the milk, or you milk the liquid from the Sonoran desert toad, their glands, and you put it on a piece of glass and you dry it in the sun and you let it crystallize. And then you scrape it off and you smoke it in a ceremonial pipe in a ceremony. And what that does is it creates a DMT in your brain. And so it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Your ego mind dissolves and you cross over and connect with God, ideally. And
Wow.
so, and I was like, oh. And I had been asking for a light activation. I was like, I need something that it's that's like a near-death experience, but without the near-death part, because I didn't want to be mangled. I didn't want to have to survive something and be in a hospital and have to, all that. I was like, I need something that's like a near-death experience, but not near-death. And so he said, and he goes, it's like a near-death experience. And I was like, oh, okay, this is it. This is So I said, all right, I'll be back. So I booked a session with him and then came back to New York, had the session with these men on the Upper East Side. And it was a beautiful ceremony, actually, because I didn't know any of them really. And then they present the pipe, and they're wearing white with stashes in a really beautiful apartment. So I just knew it was safe, and I was taken care of. There was guardianship there because I knew it was no joke. Like, this is a big deal. So you have to say a prayer as you ingest the smoke and raise your arms up, and then, smoke it. And you have to smoke the whole thing in order to get the level that's going to send you across. And so sure enough, I don't remember exactly what happened at the beginning, but I left my body and traveled across the veil and saw God. And God was there. I saw a male Shiva like blue figure. This is the second time that I had been with God. And I felt that feeling of unconditional love that a person feels when they're on the other side of the veil. And God was showing me at that time, because I was having a real problem with myself from what had happened with my ex, that I had allowed myself to be harmed by him. And so there was a real division within me, and it was causing problems in my life. Like, I couldn't move forward, because I hadn't forgiven myself. And so when I crossed the veil and talked to God, he said, it was all telepathic. He showed me a scene where I was being harmed, and he said, here, in this, even in this scene, even in this instance, you are a sacred soul and you are loved. And so what the message was is, he didn't say this part. This is me paraphrasing everything, but the message to me was, I'm not judging you. I love you. I know, you're having an earthly experience to learn. And no matter what you do, and no matter what you go through, I love you unconditionally. And you are considered a sacred being. You can never be dirty or damaged or, ruined. You're a sacred soul, and that's who you are. And so by him telling me that, I was able to forgive myself and see myself in a better way, without blaming myself or shaming myself. And so I could mend that internal rift and come back into myself to integrate and become whole again in order to move forward, leave behind what had happened, and step more fully into my power to serve. So I'm currently writing a book called Sacred Soul around all of these things that I'm telling you now in greater detail, because I think that we tend to, people, when people have experiences like that, we tend to judge them and look at them differently, you know, like why are they like that? Why did that happen? And we think I'm not like that. I mean, even after I went through that experience and I met women who were going through that experience, I would be like, how can you let that happen? And I had been in that experience. You know what I mean? It's just like this, it's weird. It's weird. So I just want people, my message is for people to accept all of themselves and love all of themselves, no matter what has happened. Like it doesn't matter if you've made the worst choices in your life, you know, and it doesn't matter if you almost died or you lost everything or whatever is happening to people. They're sacred and they're loved, and all of it is happening for them to help them awaken even more so that they can embody their soul self and lead their lives from their hearts in service to others. You know, that's the shift. That's why all of this is happening. So that we can integrate the ego and live as our higher self, helping each other out and with our hearts open and compassion pouring out of us, you know?
What do you tell women who come to you that are in an abusive relationship or have just gotten out of one? How do you guide them now with the knowledge that you received from source?
Well, I was just on a client call this morning, and this one client has been in a narcissistic relationship for 41 years, and she's ill. She's got all these problems with her body because she has been giving her power away for all that time, you know? And I and she's older. She's 70. So she thinks that it's too late to change, you know? Whereas I don't think it's ever too late. And if you don't listen to your gut that's telling you, you know, something's wrong here, this doesn't feel good. I'm not being respected and honored and loved in the way that I should be. You know, it's I my guidance is like do that inner work. Be honest with yourself. If you have codependency, you've got to work through it. But the main thing is that you have a connection to source. You and source are one. So source is your power. God is your power, and your power is love. So as long as you have God, you have everything you need. As long as you have that connection, you cannot be powerless. So you have to trust yourself. And this is what a lot of empathic, sensitive women have problems with, is that they tend to they doubt themselves. They don't have a strong sense of self. They're insecure. And so they always, the tendency is to seek acknowledgement, appreciation, love, everything from outside of the self, rather than realizing it's already in you and you have it. And you just have to own it and recognize that you are powerful.
There really is an epidemic of people who don't love themselves. And
absolutely,
it's hard.
It's the conditioning of this society. So we are actually living in a psychopathic design, where there's a parasite and there's a host. And we've all been taught that we're worthless, you know, and that is the opposite of the truth. So as we come to know the truth of who we are and come into alignment with the truth of who we are, then we can reclaim our God-given power and not let the darkness have any influence or over us ever again. Like it can't touch us. If we, when we know who we are and we're standing in our light and we're standing in our power, nothing can touch us. Nothing is greater than the light.
What things, if you could wave Elizabeth's magic wand, her rainbow wand, what would you tell people to start eliminating or really taking close examination of in their lives so they can start down a path that is more self-loving?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, okay, what I have noticed and studied for years, done a lot of research on, gotta tell you, is toxicity. So when you put toxins into your body, you will create a toxic consciousness. The physical toxicity is closely linked to mental and emotional toxicity, right? And so to purify yourself in body, mind, and spirit is going to help you become clear, right? So a lot of people live their lives, you know, where they're drinking alcohol all the time, and that's just, you know, I just feel like it's just not the path. I feel like we need to um, be more conscious of what we're eating and drinking, and choose things that are of a higher vibration, you know. And so then also it's like, well, what do you, I mean, this is kind of all known stuff. It's like, what are you plugging into? What are you watching? What are you consuming? What are you putting into your mind? How are you spending your time and energy? And if you're truly in alignment, you're serving. You know, that's the highest order. We're here to serve others. And so this life can't just be about what you get and what your family has, and it's got to be about what you're giving and who you're taking care of, you know. So we are moving from the victim consciousness, which is a consumeristic, parasitic cycle, right? So you consume, and it's all about me. And then the creator cycle is the opposite. So you become a generator of energy, and you become a generator where you're giving, giving, giving. But first you have to be, you know, in alignment. You can't give if you're a victim. Like you have to make that shift and become the creator self and your soul self in order to become the generator. So did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it's very good. What what about equal energy exchange? How does that play into it? Because I feel like you could get yourself in a codependent cycle again if you're giving, giving, giving all the time. You should be able to receive. And I see a lot of people out there that have a real problem receiving.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. So thanks for addressing that, because it's not just about giving, 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 right? But when you're in a good place and you can give, then you know how to take care of yourself and you know how to receive from others. Yeah. So I think a healthier model would be the interdependence, right? The interdependent model. So
Now, you
I agree.
mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, there's a little delay there, so I'm kind of
Okay,
late.
no worries.
Um, you mentioned earlier that you had gone to see Source the second time. What was the first time when you connected with God?
It was that first awakening in Australia when I had the very first energy healing session.
Did you know you were
Yeah.
seeing God at that time, or did you have to figure it out later?
I know I felt I didn't see the way I did the second time, but I felt it. And then there was a meditation not long after that day where I um, was in a void. I was in the space of the void, the no thing, the nothingness, the no time, no, it's complete darkness and void of anything. But okay, so that leads me to another experience that I had that was super powerful. And it was about a month after the Bufo session in New York. And I was pet sitting in upstate New York. And I, I, one of my highest wishes is asking God, is to merge with Him. Like, what's your highest wish? Well, I just want to merge with you. But while I'm in a body, I don't want to have to wait until I die and my soul leaves my body and then I come back to you. I want to have the experience of being one with you in the body. So, so on this particular day, a month after the Bufo, and I'll just mention here that when you do take the Bufo, it's in your system for up to 3 months, so you can have reactivations. Where,
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's cool. And so I was at this pet sit, and I was cooking salmon for dinner, and I'd forgotten the woman told me, "Don't turn the oven on. Don't use the oven." Like she had told me that a few months back when I pet sat for the first time, and I completely forgot about it. So I turned the oven on, cooked the salmon, and I'm sitting at the table, like on a course, my head in the computer. And then next 20 minutes go by, and I look up, and the whole house is full of smoke. I was like, oh my God, the oven. So I run and turn off the oven. And then I have to open all the windows because I realize, you know, got to clear the house of the smoke. And then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and I just picked up my phone and got on YouTube at like 6:30 in the morning, which was really unusual for me to do that. And I started watching this video on parallel universes, and Greg Braden was talking about how there's another version of you on another dimension in another universe that you can access. And something that he said in that video made me have this realization. I was like, oh. And as soon as I had this thought about like this was possible and I could experience this, and he was saying you have to have a thought mixed with a feeling. So something came out of my heart at the same time, and I heard this like crackling noise, like electricity in my energy field. It was like, and then all of a sudden I started to shake, and all the cells in my body were moving up, and I felt like I was in this corridor of energy that was just going up my body. And then all of a sudden I went into this other dimension. Like I did what he said you could do. I accessed my highest self in another dimension. And it turns out it was the seventh dimension. And then all of a sudden I just felt again like I was on the other side of the veil. I was in heaven, but I was in the kingdom of heaven. And I could see the light beings around me, my team, because they were overseeing the whole thing. Like they had smudged the house to purify it so that this could happen the night before. And I could see them, and but it was more the feeling of what I was experiencing was pure bliss without any fear. And that is a feeling that not many of us know what that feels like, because it's like you're free, you're just unconditional love, and there's nothing else there. There's no lower emotions. So it was this kingdom of heaven, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in the kingdom of heaven. I'm in the kingdom of heaven. And in this space, I realized that it was all the solutions to all our problems was about lay in frequency. Like if we can access this other aspect of us and embody that, then we are then becoming a different frequency where hate and poverty and greed can't exist and don't exist. So I got this feeling that this was the solution for humanity, to be able to access this other frequency within and to enter the kingdom of God within. And I enjoyed that experience for 8 hours. And at one point, I started to have one negative thought. It's like this one negative thought started to come in, and I could feel it. And I was like, I could feel myself coming out of the kingdom of God with this negative thought. And so I went, no, 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 no. And I pushed it away. I didn't allow it to come in. And I remained there until I had to leave the pet sit. And it was the most profoundly amazing experience of my life, because I merged with God and I embodied and I experienced what heaven on earth truly feels like. And I could see that this was like the design for the human being, that we are going to be living like that on this earth at some point, you know, and it might be during the golden age or the 1,000 years of peace, or however many years of peace it's going to be, where we live as our God self, as unconditional love, as in harmony with one another. And it just gave me so much hope, and it was a huge gift. And I've been asking ever since, like, I want to go back there. I want to experience that again. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Wow, it's so frustrating when you hear something beautiful like that and you know in your heart it's possible. And then you see all the toxicity in the world, how they're trying to poison everything, us, the sky, the food, everything. And how can we get to that space? Will these elites or the 1% or whomever is doing all this to us eventually get kicked out?
That's a good question. And I think that my response to that is, like, God is all powerful, right? God's all powerful. So to me, the light wins. And whoever does survive in humanity at whatever time it happens does get to experience that, the kingdom of God on earth, because it's written. This bird, this bird is waiting. I'm just waiting. There he goes. Okay. It's written in the book. It's like there is going to be a time when the human being reclaims their divinity and their divine inheritance on this earth. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I got to tell you, I've never read the Bible. I am not a religious person, but all these things keep happening to me, and I'm like, I'm like, this is the kingdom of God. I didn't even know about this, but here I am in it. I'm not a Christian. I love Jesus. I love Jesus. I love God. And I think that God is all powerful and God will see us through. And it's that faith, I think, that gets us there. So you don't have to be in a church, and you just have to have that love in your heart and a true connection and relationship with God in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. I've sinned most of my life, I mean, I've repented, but I'm not doing all those things that a lot of the Bible says you have to do, or churches say you have to do to enter the kingdom of God. You just have to be open-hearted, loving, trusting, and have a good relationship with the Creator and want it, like truly want it.
Yeah. And I feel like I mean, what gives me faith is getting those little glimpses of heaven on earth and those moments of feeling like the love pouring in or the bliss and all of that. So I believe Team Light, whatever you want to call it, has won already. And there's a
Yeah.
last ditch effort going on now, a scramble to try and stop it. But it's the train's already heading 100 miles an hour down the track.
Yeah. Yeah. It's futile. Like I said, I just think if you are in the light and you have faith in God and you are here to love, you can't be the darkness has no power over you.
Absolutely. So, what magical spirit experiences has Elizabeth had in Costa Rica thus far?
Oh my gosh, I've been here 3 months and I haven't had any and yet here like magical ex the last one I had was last year. If I'd love to tell you about that one.
Yes,
Um,
please.
I yeah, okay. So I just finished giving this workshop in New York, and I was still having some digestive issues in my body, and it was kind of bad at the time. It was like last March, and I prayed to Jesus one night. And I said, Jesus, I need some help here. Like, we need to get rid of these trapped emotions because I've cried my eyes out. I've hit things. I've screamed. I've yelled. I've done my best to get rid of these emotions, but I need some help. I said it with all of my heart. And so that night I fell asleep and I had this dream. And in my dream, this guide named Barry came through. Not Jesus. Jesus must have been busy. We sent Barry. He's like, Barry, over to you, Barry. So Barry shows up. Barry's this like 30-year-old guide with his modern haircut. And he's like, okay, I'm here to help. I'm here to take your repressed emotions. So so go ahead and give them to me. And I realized that afterwards that I had to be asleep because if I had been awake, my conscious mind would have gotten in the way. So because I was asleep, I could release them. So in the dream, there was all these like glowing strands of green energy coming off my body. So if you ever seen The Matrix, that sort of glowing green, right? And there's like waves of green light coming off my body. And then I just saw all these like cards about the size of a credit card. They had little chips in them, and they were coming out of my body, all over my body, into the glowing streams of light and going away. And I realized that those cards were memory cards with all the memories and the emotions within them that were leaving my body. And a bunch of them left. And then I woke up the next day and all my digestive issues that were causing real problems were gone.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Are we a
Yeah.
simulation?
That I don't know. That I do not know. I like that idea. But what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about that dream. My ayahuasca experience was very similar to that. I didn't enjoy it. First of all, the first round, I saw my star family in cartoon form. I was laying outside and I looked up at the sky and I saw thousands of outlines of faces looking down at me, and that was cool. Then after the second dose, I started to see the matrix, the green neon numbers, zeros and ones on everything, which was fine. But then there was this very harsh metallic clang that was very rhythmic that was inside of my head. And I didn't like that part.
Yeah.
So I asked the person facilitating to make it go away eventually because nothing I was doing or feeling into seemed to be helping in any way. And it went away. But I'm like, What was that? Was it showing me the simulation? Feels like yours was
Interesting.
too, but in dream state.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. It's, I will say this human experience is a wild ass ride.
It sure is. And there are days I want to get off, but I can't wait to see the ending. So I'm
Right?
sticking around.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's super exciting. And even when I look back on the shittiest times, I'm like, well, that was kind of cool how I made it out of that.
I know, I know. And I think, so much is, well, everyone's has a different path, right? So it was funny because I was reading your post this morning about cancer, your cancer journey. And so you said that it wasn't just a one-time thing, like you had to deal with it more than once. So what happened there?
Oh, it was not so much once as it just kept progressing. I kept thinking, okay, I
Oh,
did this. Now I'm going to get better. Then I would find, oh, no, you got to go to the next level. You're not better. Then it would go to the next level. And I'm like, okay, now I'm better. No, you're not better. Now you have to go through this. So
okay.
I'm very stubborn. So I had to be shook hard to get out of my life. I had
That's
gotten
what
out
I'm
of an
saying. Yeah.
abusive relationship. Um, and as I was home on my cancer treatment, um, my job was gunning for me when I came back. So I had to get out of that industry too because it was very toxic. So yeah, all these things were just pushing me. School of hard knocks.
How many years was that?
2013 was the year that I went through all of that. I mean,
Okay.
I felt kind of spiritual, in touch with, hey, if there's anything extraterrestrial or witchy or any of that, I'm down for that. But it was kept between me and maybe some people that I knew were kind of into it too. I would not share any of that with anybody. I would never do the things that I'm doing now and share that publicly with anybody. But it
Right.
was, I had to come out and do it.
And I think the more transparent we are, the better, because people are going through what we've been through. And once they find out that someone else has been through it and has made it through and has no shame or, you know, fear about it anymore, then it gives them permission to, or it gives them whatever the word is, it helps them. So, I'm glad that you're sharing everything. And I'm willing to share all of my stuff too for that reason, because we're here just having they're just experiences, they're just vehicles for our evolution, and the less we judge them and carry the shame and guilt and fear that is part of it, the better we are.
And I've noticed too, you can't hide anything anymore. I can tell instantly if a stranger is telling me a line of shit or, being very authentic with me. It's like it's the ability to do that is going away. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that. Yeah, it's like this planet, the frequency that it's at, it doesn't allow that to be anymore, because as Earth ascends and everyone on her is ascending, it's like all the darkness, everything is being dislodged and brought up.
What would you say? I've heard different trains of thought, and I'm sure you could guess which one I align with, but a lot of people believe that, okay, you're healing or you're teaching people, therefore you must be very wise and know everything, or you must be very healed. What would you say to that?
So at first, that's how I thought it should be, right? And so when I was unhealed, I was teaching people, I felt this incredible fraud. Like I had this imposter syndrome. Like I'm like, oh my God, people can't find out the truth. And then I realized it's like, well, we're all teaching. We're all teachers for each other. So that's why I'm happy to say I have all this wisdom and to share to help you, but I'm also going through my own awakening continuously. We are going to until the day we die. So we're always going to have more and more and more to learn and to uh, integrate and to acknowledge. As long as we're honest in what we're dealing with and what our struggles are, I think it's valid that we can be teachers for each other. You know, we're not here to be perfect. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also think we're here to enjoy the planet's offerings too.
Yeah. So what does that mean to you?
If I want to go out for a nice meal and a glass of wine, I'm going to go and enjoy it and maybe sit by the ocean and watch the waves or
Good for you.
go in the forest and just bliss out in the forest,
Yeah. Yeah.
take a trip. They're all part of this experience. And who knows, it could be leading me to another lesson.
Right. I agree with you. I agree. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Elizabeth, talk a little bit about what you have going on as far as offerings, if you have anything
Okay.
special coming up, and we will, of course, post all of your information,
Thank
website,
you.
social below for people to get in touch with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So I do online energy healing sessions. Well, I do it remotely, so over the phone. And it's an hour and a half. And I have an introductory price for people who've never done a session with me for $85. And I also work with people on a sliding scale. But it can be to help you with specific issues that you have. I'm sending energy and also bringing through messages and spiritual guidance for you. And like I said, I work with women who are sensitives and are empaths who may have been or are still in abusive relationships that want to become empowered, like, and pretty much anyone else. But that's sort of my niche. And I also I teach online energy healing. So I have a course on my website, which is energyhealingteacher.com. And it's a fantastic, really in-depth course all about the chakras and how to set up sacred space and channel light, which is what I do. And I've been teaching it since 2011, so I have quite a bit of experience. I also have a book that's available on Amazon. It's my first book called I, My Transformational Journey to the Light by Elizabeth Wright. And then I'm writing my second book, so keep an eye out for that. It's called Sacred Soul. And I'll also be doing some retreats here in Costa Rica. So I think the first retreat is going to be in August, and I will be putting information about that on my website, energyhealingteacher.com, very soon. And you can also, when you go to my website, energyhealingteacher.com, sign up for my newsletter, because then that way you get an awesome newsletter every month and you can see all of my happenings, all of my offerings and what I'm doing. But I'd love to meet you and work with you. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. The retreat sounds fabulous. I would love an
Yeah.
excuse to go to Costa Rica.
Okay, cool. Cool.
All right, my dear, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and you being here. And I'm so happy that bird did not do its business on you.
Me too. I know they say it's lucky, but I'm just glad
Yeah,
I feel luckier without it. Hey, thank you so much. It was really fun and I appreciate you
absolutely.
inviting me
Absolutely.
on. I really do. Yeah.
All
Thanks.
right. Bye, everybody.